Okay, folks, so let's do some housekeeping, and then we'll kind of dive on in. Okay, so as everybody who's been on our webinars before, you know that we've got our best and brightest here today. So we got Andy Schrader with us. Andy is our Vice President of Digital Services. He oversees a whole bunch of things, a lot of our Razor's Edge services, a lot of our automation stuff, helps on the consulting side. Before that, Andy, you worked as what, a major gift officer, director of development, all the things, right?
Yep, I was actually thinking right before we started this, Nick. I feel like I could be a decathlete in the Olympics. I think I've done about every different role you could do in development. So I've done more of the database side of stuff. I've done major giving. I've done events. I've done alumni stuff. I've done plan giving sorts of things. So I've been the person who's been managed. I've been the manager. So really have kind of checked, I think, most of the boxes and excited to share some of what I've learned today with the folks who are here.
Been managed. What was it like to manage the young Andy? Were you you have a lot to learn, or were you just always a golden child like
No, I definitely had a lot to learn, but I was blessed to have people kind of above me that were like, okay, this guy's eager, like let's just let him run with it. And we'll talk a little bit about later, but that for me was kind of the biggest thing because I learned so many things just out of curiosity and was kind of empowered to learn what plan giving is and how it works and those kinds of things. And now I actually talked to somebody right before this meeting about plan giving and how to utilize it in Razor's Edge. So definitely learned the skills and they've stuck with me.
awesome? Okay,
Yeah.
so Andy's absolutely the right guy for this. If you've been on our webinars before, it's not just Andy that we call upon for expertise. We've got a wonderful team. I'm going to try and use a different photo every time now, Andy. That's my new commitment as we go through the year. Every year we're going to do a different random candid photo. PSG, we're a small but mighty team. This is us, I think, volunteering in Minnesota about a year ago. What we do, why you can decide whether or not to listen to what we talk about or not. We run very large annual appeals for a whole bunch of clients. That's one thing, the core thing we do. We raise hundreds of millions of dollars a year. We also know Razor's Edge inside and out, and actually a whole bunch of organizations have outsourced their Razor's Edge to us. Andy and his team oversee millions of constituents. So for better or worse, we know that grind, right? We know we know it inside and out. We feel your pain. We do a whole bunch of amazing fundraising automation stuff. We have the best clients in the world, adding more every day. We've got two software products. Andy, can you believe we actually have
I
software now?
know.
Like, we don't know anything about software, but in this world of doing fundraising, we kept running into problems and we'd find a way to solve it. So Ask Genius is the one, many of you use it. It solves one painful problem. When you're sending out a fundraising appeal and you want to set custom ask amounts for everybody based on their giving history so that everybody gets asked for the right amount, that's what Ask Genius does. Automate Genius, a little bit newer on the block. It has taken the world by storm. You can join the waitlist. You'll learn more about Automate Genius. It helps you automate some tasks, makes your life easier, delights your donor, gets rid of a bunch of headaches. Fundraising automation is the future, so we're excited to be working in there.
Mhm.
That's not the topic for today. That's just who the heck we are. What we're going to talk about, and by we, I mean I'm going to serve up a whole bunch of questions for our friend Andy here, to talk about managing large teams. Okay, so we get asked at PSG, we get calls all the time, right? Calls about like, hey, we're switching software. What should we do? Hey, we're inside a Razor's Edge and something seems wonky. How do we fix it? Hey, X, Y, Z. One thing we get asked about a lot that we never really talk about in these webinars is the personal side of things, Andy. So like the
Mhm.
like interacting database manager and fundraisers and major gift officers. How do we get them to all sing kumbaya? How do we get them to row in the same direction? We've been inside of a lot of orgs where things are broken. Is that fair to say? I mean, just
Yeah,
messy and ugly.
not optimal. I would say
Yeah.
not optimal. Yeah,
In
broken is a
consulting,
negative.
in consulting speak, we would say there's lots of opportunities here, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what we're talking about. Okay, so first, let's just lay the groundwork. The modern development office. What does a development office look like? You've got a development director. You could call them an advancement director. It's entirely up to you. Typically, then you've got an annual appeal director. You've got a major gift officer or a team of them. You've got somebody doing plan gifts for you. Okay. You've got special events and you've got a grant writer. This is a typical development structure. You might be meatier and beefier in one area than others, depending on your organization, whether you're a university or a hospital or a religious organization. And then over here on the side, you have your database administrator. Okay, this is the person who owns your database, whether you're using Razor's Edge, Salesforce for nonprofits, Bloomerang, Virtuous, anything in between, right? Slate, on and on. That's your team. And the database administrator, I just want to point out from the start, sits over here kind of next to the finance office, right? Where you've got your CFO, controller, and auditor, and all those folks. And the first thing I just want to talk about in terms of structure is how your database administrator is really living with a foot in both camps. Does that make sense, Andy? Is that fair?
It does, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
If you're doing it right, this is an accurate model.
Yes. And I know I'm a firm because I've been in places, and so have you, where the database administrator is actually in the finance office,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Which
They
brings up its
report to
own,
the finance office. Yeah.
they report to the CFO, which brings its own set of headaches too, where the development team is like, hey man, like you're supposed to be one of us, and like it's all friction, which we'll talk about.
Hmm.
But let's focus first on the database administrator. According to ChatGPT, this is what a database administrator looks like. Okay.
Austin has aged quite a bit in that photo, right?
I know, right? Uh, I think we've done webinars on AI actually. If people are curious about creating images in ChatGPT, we'll look that up for you. Okay, database administrator. Things to know about him or her: more finance than fundraising, just in the functional approach to the job. More of a finance role than it is a fundraising role. Typically, they need to know both if they're good. Cares deeply about process and procedure, and typically is a giant, enormous, often not unrespected, but unheralded source of institutional knowledge, right? Because if you're in the database world, you need to know where the bodies are buried. You need to know how we do things because it's really important in how the database is set up. Okay, that's your database administrator. Typically, that's what you're looking at. Over here, we have the Andy Schraders of the world.
20 years ago, Andy Schrader's of the world.
That
Yeah.
is 20 years ago. And Andy is the unicorn. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. Andy's a unicorn because he's both of these. And I mean that with great sincerity. You do not find people like Andy. And when we found him, we locked him down for a long lifetime contract. Somebody that knows and is as nerdy as the day is long on Razor's Edge and data and knows it and knows lockboxes and scan lines and mod 10 and all the stuff you need to know, but also is absolutely outgoing as heck and understands people and can do that major gift role. You do not typically find both of them. So that's why Andy's the right one to talk to today. Major gift officer, feet on the desk, right? Got the phone up to his ear, very focused on people, doesn't really care a whole lot about process or procedure. Got a tea time at 3 o'clock, heading out, maybe to meet with a donor, maybe not, and also it's worth noting that's relatively high turnover in that position, like what we call frontline fundraisers. Much higher turnover than in the database role, right? Which is more of a finance sort of this is my job. I'm here, forever. I'm going to grind it out. I'm going to win. I'm going to get good at it. Somebody in that frontline fundraiser role, it's very transitory, right? They're bouncing around, working to climb the ladder. The friction that arrives is between those two positions, okay? And so first, I want to talk about friction for a second. What do we mean when we say friction? This is going to sound weird for me to tell all of the fundraisers out there. Go read the U.S. Marine Corps Warfighting Manual. But I'm not even joking. I had a friend who recommended this to me, and it was such a great recommendation. And I don't even know, Andy, I don't think I've shared this at PSG even I share a lot of book
Oh,
recs, but I haven't shared this. I think it was a donor that told me this. It's amazing. Obviously, some military guy, but he's like, go read this.
everybody's getting this book for Christmas at PSG. I think
It's
that
it's
just
it's a pamphlet.
became
Like
relevant.
it's awesome. It's like 80 pages long. It is written in just clear, normal terms. It is so great. But I like this, what they talk about friction. They say, because they talk about it a lot in the military, you got to go take a hill, there's friction. Friction's a force that resists all action, right? And it saps your energy. And that I felt seen when I read that, right? Like it saps all your energy, like you're stuck in the mud. It makes simple things difficult, makes difficult seemingly impossible. And it talks about where this can come from. Again, I'm not here to tell you about military strategy. I am here to tell you that this U.S. Marine Corps manual is absolutely a banger. It's awesome. So it says friction can be self-induced, lack of clearly defined goals, lack of coordination, which is happening in your development office, unclear plans, complicated plans, complex command relationships. When your database administrator reports to the CFO and not the development director, that is going to lead to friction. Okay, so that's an important thing. So lack of coordination, lack of clear planning, command relationships, all of that. Go read the Marine Corps manual. How this shows up in development offices, I'm going to give you 5 examples. Andy, you're going to tell me if you've ever seen any of these before, okay?
Okay.
And there's blame to go around. So let's start here. The first thing that shows up on friction and how we're going to solve it, the magic question requirement, right? So this is the DBA who's like, I don't understand what everybody's upset about. I gave you precisely the data you requested, exactly requested it. Andy, what are we talking about when we talk about like the magic question issue?
So Essentially, the DBA is going to take verbatim what you're asking for. So, hey, I'm heading to this area. I need a request of, all the donors in this area. I'm going to try to create visits, right? So the DBA then takes that as, okay, I'm going to give you a list of maybe 2,000 people that live in the Washington, D.C. area. And the major gift officer is like, holy hell, I can't visit 2,000 people. This is ridiculous. Some of these people haven't even given before. It, there's no clarifying questions on either side. The development officer doesn't say specifically what they're looking for, and because of that, the DBA does exactly what they're asking and isn't asking those clarifying questions of the major gift officer for fear of being ridiculed or they just don't have time to ask the questions. It's just do what they do. So
Yep.
it's a request that could have been one request that ends up being two or three or four iterations by the time it's all said and done.
And if you're in an organization where you find that's the case, where every request you feel like you go back and forth forever and ever, like this is something that you should focus on. If
Mm-hmm.
we're being generous to the DBAs, we'd say, well, words have meaning and they're taking your meaning and they're very literal people. They're giving it back to you. If we're not being generous to the DBAs, I've worked with some DBAs who almost take pride in delivering exactly what you ask, but knowing that that's not really what you want, right? And the best DBAs in the world are the opposite. They take pride in saying, okay, Andy's asking for this. I'm pretty sure what he wants is this. I'm going to clarify with him, but like what would be even more helpful would be if I gave Andy the list in this format, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
planning for a special event. If I gave it to him along with like a column that includes whether the person gave yet and their phone number, that might be more helpful than just giving him exactly the names and mailing addresses or whatever it might be. So this is
Mm-hmm.
a huge source of friction. There's a reason it's number one. It drives frontline fundraisers, non-DBA people absolutely bonkers when you have to ask the absolute perfect magic question to get the result. We need DBAs to meet us halfway, right? Like understand what it is I need and then help me. You know better than I do. Help me get the report, in a
Mm-hmm.
certain way. All right. So that's source of friction number one. And then we're going to talk about how to make it through this. Okay. Number two, don't even need explanation. Last minute data request. Andy, you never did that to a DBA, I'm sure.
I might have once or twice. Yeah.
Can you give me the report? So PSG, who is the largest user of Razor's Edge on the planet, we have lots of clients. We're no stranger to people saying, "Oh, by the way, we're having an event this weekend. We need to It's Friday afternoon. We need a couple donation pages for this gala that's taking place tomorrow morning." Doesn't even need us to talk about it. We understand. Everybody knows that one. Reluctance to change or rigidity. I mean, this is something again on the DBA side, which is, I'm sorry, this is the way we do it. The system doesn't let me do it a different way. I know that you want it a different way. It doesn't work that way. Andy, in my experience, this is one of two things. This is one, the database person is accurate. They know their system and they're just
Mm-hmm.
explaining, look, I didn't build the dang thing. This is the only way we can do it.
Yeah.
More often, and this is going to get me in trouble with all the DBAs, more often than that, it is possible to do what the person's asking, but the DBA doesn't know how to do it yet because they're just have work piled on them. They're buried. They don't have time to go to BBCon or go to training. They don't have time to go to the virtuous user conference. Like there is ways to do it. They don't know how to do it, and they just want to deliver it a certain way.
And I think that this one in particular, Nick, is really showing its face more and more. Because and I know looking at the list here, there are a lot of Razor's Edge users on the call. The fundraisers, so the sharp looking guy there typically uses NXT, whereas the AI generated, older Austin, is somebody that lives primarily in database view, right? And so those database kind of RE7, and I know we'll kind of get into that a little bit later on.
Yep.
There are some limitations in that can be solved, but the DBA who's been doing everything in the database view for 2 decades is refusing to learn the new ways of doing things, and so it doesn't exist because I haven't learned it or I haven't looked to see if it's possible any other way than the way I've been doing things for the last 20 years.
Yep.
It's just becoming more and more prevalent. And if DBAs are not willing to kind of make those moves, they're stuck. We actually have a couple organizations that we work with where people have threatened to quit their job if they're being forced to start using NXT and some of the different tasks and things like that
Yep.
they're being asked to do.
We get comfortable, and you know the work. I totally get it. What happens just from a practical standpoint, like a firm like ours gets called in, we get called in when the guy on the left is like, I know there's a better way to do this. I keep getting told it's not possible. Eventually, that dam is going to break, right? Either they're going to leave, they're going to lose their minds, the DBA is going to get, frustrated, lose their mind, Or somebody like us gets called in to translate for both sides, which is a role we play all the time, which is we hear from the frontline people who don't know how to use the precise language, but they're like, I know that there's got to be a way I can get what I need. And we're the ones that can help teach the DBA, yes, this is possible, or whether they knew it or not, or whether there's other ways to do it. So this is a source of friction. We're going to talk about how to solve it. What else do we have? Number 4, not respecting the data, right? This is an age-old issue. Frontline fundraiser. Andy, were you good about call notes when you did?
Uh, my call notes were always in my head and sometimes on paper. Very rarely were they in the CRM. Like they were just not in the database at all until like the last day of the month because I knew that reports were going to be due the following day and I needed to show that I should still be employed and that I actually did something in the last 30 days.
I appreciate you being candid. This is a safe space. You can do that. But
Yeah,
what you just described, I'm sure, is 90% right
absolutely.
and it's different skill sets. And we have a webinar we did on this. We talked about like I used an analogy of like don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, and it like broke the internet. Nobody had ever heard that before, so that made me really self-conscious. But maybe the folks here have heard it. But we did a webinar about this. Database people are always so mad at the frontline fundraisers. Why don't they, why aren't they in Razor's Edge? And the reality is they're just not, and they weren't built that way, and they're never going to change that way. Like yes, we can expect them to enter call notes. Or if they want reports about like what gifts are in the pipeline, they actually have to put the gifts into the pipeline with end dates and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, but a little bit of grace goes a long way. Final one, designing processes around the data, not the donor. And this is a DBA thing, right? And we've had clients that fit this bill as well. We have a very large client who had a longtime DBA who kind of, ran the place and she'd been there a while. All sorts of great qualities. One thing that was missing the boat was their entire fundraising process was designed around making it easy to get good, clean data in, which on its own is a laudable goal. Probably not a goal that you would set out if it comes at the expense of gifts. In this client, the database person on every donation form, before you could make a gift to the organization, you had to enter your 9-digit constituent ID code, a code that no one on earth knows outside of Razor's Edge, administrators. Uh, and that's the most extreme example we can think of, like designing a process for the wrong thing. Your donation process should be as few fields as possible. Click donate, give me your name and an email address, and you're off and running. Don't make them jump through hoops. That's a source of friction, right? Again, we understand how you get there. You want clean data. I want clean data. We understand, but it's not serving the larger development office as a whole. Okay. So now let's talk about how do we get people rowing in the same direction? How do we reduce friction? We've identified what Andy and I believe are the top 5 things that we see time and time and time again. What's the best advice we've seen that works? Like, how do you get past that stuff? I would say, Andy, you speak eloquently on this. I'll just put the bullet points up. What do you mean when we talk about break down the silos? Everybody gets it, but like, how do you do that?
Yeah, so I will say in all of my time in working in development, the kind of one of those like aha moments, and I'll just never ever forget it. I had recently taken on the job as the executive director of development for an organization, and I sat down with the team and kind of asked them how individually, right? So aside from everybody else, how their role impacts what others are doing in the organization. And almost every single person I encountered said, "Well, I don't know how other people do their job. I only know how I do my job and what I do." To the point where they didn't even understand how their job like allowed other people to do their job. And so I spent a couple weeks kind of educating the team on like how the development process works and why it is important for the major gift people to be putting in their call notes because somebody else that runs reports is running a report assuming that all the data is in there, up to date, accurate, so on and so forth. How the finance office, which isn't the development office, which we are all working in, is relying on those kinds of things. And for the first time, the team really felt engaged in a way where it was like, oh, okay, now I understand what I'm doing. I appreciate what others are doing and why they're asking me for certain things or why they're upset because certain things aren't done, right? Like they understood it better. But the biggest thing for me, Nick, was like like the flip, like the flip switch, whatever. I mean, things it was like, oh, well, now that I know that this is what they're going to do, I can do things in my area that actually make it easier, or there's some duplicative processes, and I don't need to do this because somebody else is doing this, right? So that was, like I said, it was really that aha moment, but making sure that people understand like the whole picture, not just their role, their office, their area, division, whatever,
Right.
is a big thing.
So practically, what are we talking about? We talking about like if I'm running a large team, right? Might have
Yeah,
10, 11, 15 people in my development
yeah.
office, some finance. Like, is it we have a weekly meeting or something, we give somebody 20 minutes to be like, hey, you have a month, but like I want you to give a 20-minute breakdown and make it entertaining and
Yeah.
like snappy, but
Yeah.
like walk us through what you do. Is that what we're talking about? Like, is that a
Kind of,
way?
yeah. I mean, like, like what are the areas that like what are the challenges or barriers that you're facing in your area, right? I mean, and that was one of the things we talked about. Like, what are the things that make my job harder than it should be, right? And just make everybody aware of that because there might be somebody in another area that can say, "Oh, I know how to do this," or "I can help, I can do this, and that will make this less of a burden for you," right?
Yep.
And also things that are going really, really well and things that you really would have a hard time changing because you know change is going to happen, but it's like let's if these things are working well, we're feeling good about it, it's impactful, but let's kind of keep it right. But truly educating people on how things work and how their part of the whole thing works. They
Yep.
understood their own job better because they knew what everybody else was doing. But yeah, taking time to educate people on why the grants office is important and kind of what that cycle is like, right? There are busy times, there are less busy times. In the
Right.
less busy times, that person might be able to help open mail or, enter deceased records or update data or, those kinds of things, which for another person, it's like they're buried in deceased and duplicate records. Like, let's
Yep.
get you some help.
I can think of two real world examples where this would everybody on the call could benefit. One is database administrator interacting with finance, the like understanding the things that finance does with
Mhm.
reconciliation. Like that's a huge issue. Like we
Yeah,
have seen so many like, kumbaya moments when development understands, wait, finance gets this, and then they create a pivot table, and then they do all this other stuff with funds, and then they match up stuff. Like, what if I just gave it to them in a way that doesn't require, like, that is happening.
absolutely.
So that's one big
Yeah,
area. The other place I see would be like, I'm thinking of Sarah Aligo here, who does such a great job with our direct mail and printing. Having the gift processors understand the timeline of printing and why, like, if you're running a large appeal, you send out letter one, you wait a month, and then you send out letter two to anybody that hasn't responded yet. And when there's a gap and when you don't have gifts processors or lag time, you end up having to send letter two to people that probably just made a gift, and that hurts the relationship. So, like, kind of showing all those dominoes that go into a mailing going out in a suppression file and why that exists and what it like. That seems another area probably that's ripe for this. Would you agree with that?
for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So um, add it to your weekly meetings. If you don't do that, if then this is great retreat fodder too, right? Go do an
Hmm.
offsite, spend a day, have everybody. Don't just do all of this. Maybe do two or three people and then do something else and do two or three other people. Have them walk through. Don't let it be a gripe session. Just have it be like, here's the best parts of my job and here's the friction parts, that I wish everybody knew. It'll blow your mind how your colleagues want to make your job easier.
And we do this at PSG, and I think it does. I mean, when we do our quarterly strategic planning, like it gives people an understanding of one that you're working, you're doing the work that you say, like, and but how like why are certain things a challenge? Why are you missing deadlines? Why are you behind? Like it's just an opportunity to kind of understand and appreciate what's going on, right? And offer advice. You might not be able to solve all the problems, but you might have a little bit more patience and understanding if you realize what the person is dealing with than just assuming they're lazy, they're late or whatever.
And in almost every case, when we do this, and the people that find out how much, anytime somebody's doing like an inordinate amount of manual labor,
Mhm.
there's almost always a solve for that, right? Like in this day and age, it is
Mhm.
rare that there's any task that really involves you to do as much manual labor as some people are doing.
We,
Um,
I was gonna say, Nick, we have now too, and Austin and Stacy aren't here today, but they're our automation gurus. Like so often we're at a meeting and they'll be like, "Oh, we can totally automate that. We can totally automate that." And it's like, where have you been for the last 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years? But that's definitely the direction that organizations are heading in is trying to automate more things.
yep. Okay. And we'll talk about automation. Postmortem. I want to say this was a big deal for me. I remember when I was early working on. I am very good at planning things, right? Here's the step by step. Here's the vision of where we want to go. Here's the implementation. What clicked for me was realizing part of that planning is to schedule a meeting before you even have the event or before the annual appeal goes out or whatever year-end appeal, whatever it might be. Schedule a postmortem, get it on the books so that you don't miss it. And then you go through the process and you've got that meeting where you all come together, the data people, the finance people, the development people, and you talk about what worked, what didn't work, what could we make better. If you just make this a normal part of your planning, you will be shocked how many of that friction points you can sand away. The normal things when you have an event and it's annoying when the names are wrong or you don't, ever have the spouse's name correct. Like all that stuff that you can talk about that are friction points. When you get everybody talking about it, you can fix it for the next one. So that's another great helpful tip
Mhm.
that we found. Incentives work. If you want to talk about incentives, read Charlie Munger, right, from here in Omaha. Always talks about the power incentives. I like this, Andy. You were on a team that did this, right? So I'm
Mhm.
the leader of your development office.
Yeah.
I'm not talking brings it up or suggests it. I'm saying actually tasks everybody with find a way to make your counterpart's job easier. And your counterpart is if you're a frontline fundraiser, is a database person, vice versa. And it is going to be part of your job description in our quarterly reviews or whatever you do. Like I am going to have you tell me what are the ways, Andy, that you found to make Austin's life
Yeah.
easier and vice versa.
Yeah.
It works.
We
It just plain works.
and it does. And it again, it's like I sometimes think about the movie Big, right? Where uh, we're going way back here, but I
Who
think
doesn't think
again.
about the movie Big all the
But
time?
it's like you have a much greater understanding and appreciation when you're thrown into that area of like, oh, like there are some challenges I'm going to have to navigate through. And for me, being the guy, always going out for lunch and going to golf events and those kinds of things, like when I had to pump the brakes and figure out like how I can make the grant writing process easier, I was like, oh, I hate writing. This is tedious stuff. I don't get to interact with people, but it forced me to kind of say, okay, in this role, these are things that I would do differently. And then we had the opportunity to present them to the people in those positions and gave them something to think about, right? Not everything worked, but it at least gave them ideas and allowed other people to think outside the box and bring kind of, again, that engagement and appreciation into what it is that they're doing.
And if we're
They
talking about
felt
managing,
they felt heard in a different way because we were the ones speaking for them.
yep. And if we're talking about managing a large organization, like the journey is the destination, right? The process of making the Andys of the world put on their grant writing hat and see how they like.
Still have nightmares.
But you recognize the value.
Right.
You cannot do this task. I cannot be tasked with finding a way to make the database person's job easier without stepping into their shoes and seeing through their worldview. And that
Hmm.
does something, right? Like
Hmm.
suddenly I realize now how annoying that is when I never put in my call notes, or when
Yeah.
I'm, adjusting things last minute. So this is a great tool. I know we have a lot of development directors and heads on the call today. So do this. Make this a part of your day to day, quarterly, whatever cadence you're on. And then peer groups within each role. This is kind of like the outlet. Many of the folks on here are part of like that Razor's Edge user forum on Facebook, and if you're on something else, there's probably a forum. Peer groups are important because it also gives you that vent to gripe, right? So your database people can say, "Oh, I'm so frustrated. Nobody ever asked me with enough lead time to get a report," or "You can't believe what my boss is asking me to do." That's an important function, right? Don't have those gripes going internally. Let them talk with a peer group that understands what they're going through. Major gift fundraisers, same thing too. We don't need to talk a ton about that.
Hmm.
I do want to get into because we get asked a lot. So we're moving from the soft mushy into the much more comfortable area for me, like the clinical technical side of things. So we've talked about friction. We've talked about some ways to solve it that we've seen work well. We'd love to take Q&A on this topic here before the end of the hour. I want to talk, Andy, about like systems and processes, right? So what
Hmm.
are some things that we can build in to help reduce that friction? And here, first I'm going to explain Razor's Edge. Again, not everybody's on it, but most of our clients and probably 90% of the people that come to our webinars. So if you're not familiar, this is Razor's Edge, because Andy's going to talk about this. Razor's Edge version 7 was the old one that was hosted, right? You'd install it on your machine and it would run. The new thing we call Razor's Edge NXT is actually two things. Andy, is that right? So there's database
Yep.
view, looks like
Yep.
DOS or Windows 3.0, right? Like
Yeah.
old school.
Very 80s to early 90s looking. Yes.
It's got an 80s aesthetic like Andy and I, and then you've got WebView, which is sort of the new web based thing, which is kind of a skin. Both still exist, right? There's not one without
Yep.
the other. That's what we're talking about. Andy, what I want you to do, if you're willing,
Hmm.
show us NXT, and I'll stop sharing my screen. Show us specifically like there is a work center area where frontline fundraiser, major gift people are doing things.
Yep.
Talk to us about that and how it can kind of help reduce some friction here.
Right on. And as I'm pulling this up, I there's several people on the call that I have actually worked with this on, and so Owen, I'm looking at you, my buddy in OKC. We went through this not too long ago, but to be able to kind of talk through him or talk with him through this in a way of kind of managing his prospects, it was completely eye-opening, and he was pretty excited, which gets me excited to talk through this, right? So for those major gift people, so often why I was putting things on notes and in my head is because I didn't know where in the database to organize kind of what I was doing, organizing my thoughts, those kinds of things. And the DBAs, some of them that are on the call and out there know that this thing exists, but they haven't necessarily taken the time to educate the major gift team, those frontline fundraisers on, hey, there is this tool that exists in Razor's Edge for you. This is how to use it. This is why you should use it. And this makes not just your life easier, but actually makes my life easier. Let's
Yes.
talk about it. And
Which is
so,
which
go
is
ahead.
exactly why it's perfect for this topic, because this work center thing lives in a gray area where nobody owns it, right?
Mm-hmm.
DBAs live in database view. It's what they know. They haven't got
Yep.
into NXT because it's mostly for frontline folks.
Yep.
Frontline folks don't learn new technology. That's not their job. The database person is the one who knows technology. They're just out there golfing, you know? Like,
Yeah.
so it lives in that gray area, but it really is powerful.
Well, and the thing is even as a major gift fundraiser, like if you are using Razor's Edge, you're generally not using like the reporting and analytics piece of it, right? You're going
Yeah.
to the individual record. You might be updating a phone number or an email, or putting in a quick note of like, hey, we had Applebee's and this is like they're allergic to shellfish. Like never go to a place that has shellfish. Something like that, right?
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is, and I'll just switch this here to my information, um, fewer people, but some things that are important to think about in this, right? So as a fundraiser, I've got data that I've put inside a Razor's Edge, and I'm sharing this with you. But right now, I've got 7 people who are assigned to me. Most gift officers are going to have 100, 150 to 200 people in their portfolio. But some of the things that I had to do by myself, they're serving up here for me, right? So hey, it's telling me Lauren, who's actually one of our people here at PSG, it's telling me in this situation, Lauren has an overdue pledge, and I have no meeting scheduled with Lauren. Like I need to kind of reach out to Lauren and kind of figure out what's going on, right? Again, overdue pledge, no contact. Overdue pledge, recent gift. So in this situation, Faustino, and you can see down here, is telling me that somebody made a gift in the last 7 days. I may want to reach out and thank that person, basic things. I'm assuming that it's Faustino. If I click on there, it'll let me know, right? Again, another situation here, lapsing donor. So it's kind of providing some of those things that can be done for me, but only if the Razor's Edge data is in there, right?
Yeah.
If not, I'm going through post-it notes, which I have all over my desk. So sorry, boss, but I'm mostly organized. But this is another kind of a critical part, right? So if you are the executive director, if you're the head honcho, right, in your development office, oftentimes, the VP, the dean, the board of directors is going to say, hey, where are we at from a fundraising standpoint? What do we have out there? And ask, what's been funded? What are we expecting to get? And many situations, it's a DBA that's having to pull that report, and they only can go by what's in the system. So in other words, as the DBA once told me, if it's not in Razor's Edge, it didn't happen. I don't care, it didn't happen, right? So this is an opportunity where now as a fundraiser, I can manage where I'm at. I can say, you know what, currently I've got $6.1 million out there in money that I've asked for. Of the 6.1 million, 3.1 has been funded. So donors have actually given that. But when I look at the overall 6.1 million with what I have and what I'm expecting to get, I'm looking at a total of 5.8 million, which essentially means that the majority of what I'm asking for is being converted. But in addition, I can see where those prospects are, those 7 people, where they're at in the process here. So are they in the identification cultivation? Have I actually asked them for money yet? And in some of the situations, the people that gave, they're in the stewardship phase. Like I'm not actively asking them, but I want to make sure that I'm continuing to kind of steward them and kind of prep them, get them ready for the next ask. But if you want to know what Andy's doing or what's going on, these are my numbers that you can report. And you, Nick, as my superior, right? You would have access to see this is where my people are. This is the kind of money that I'm dealing with right now. In
Yeah.
addition, you can see here, and this is sadly, this is pretty accurate to when I was doing it. 40 past due actions. It was like, hey, you were supposed to call this person or email this person or, whatever. And sometimes it was like, I didn't check a box. I actually did it and just didn't check the box. In some situations, it's like, I'll get to it and then I'll still get to it and I'll get to it. And other things just kept piling up, right? But this does let you kind of know what's going on there. And if I were to click on those, it would actually let me know what actions I need to complete, right? So in these situations, hey, I need to call and send this or check up on this, or I was supposed to send them a thank you for attending the golf event, whatever that might be. Um, but this is an area that can help me manage the work as a fundraiser. And it makes the database administrator appreciate the work that I'm doing because it's forcing me to put in the information that he or she has been asking me to do. In often situations, my boss has been asking me for, and I'm giving them, an email with some jotted notes, but it's not actually official because it's like, this is enough to kind of pacify them until the next time they ask for it, right?
Right.
So the work center is a critical piece, particularly if you have a major gift team in your office. This is where they should be living. And this is actually, um, I kind of logged into it ahead of time, but when I log into Razor's Edge, because I'm a fundraiser, this is the first, like this is going to essentially my home screen. So if you don't have assigned fundraisers, you're going to kind of see this screen. But if you are an assigned fundraiser, when you're logging into Razor's Edge, it's actually going to by default take you to your work center. So that's what you're going to see.
Got it.
Make
So I
sense?
like, yep, that's awesome. So thank you for sharing that. So I bring that up under this topic, like managing large teams, because again, we talked the different points of friction. It can have to do with frontline people asking database people for data. That data is available inside a work center, right? And it's only available
Mm-hmm.
actually if they use work center. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, this to me, it just lives in that gray area. I don't know what all the challenges are at your organization. I know that if you're in Razor's Edge, a fair amount of those challenges are around fundraisers not getting inside a database person getting frustrated. Work center is that in between, right? Like you don't need to train all your frontline fundraisers to be inside a database view doing power queries and things like that. Work center is the answer. This is where they go get what they need, and it's helpful to them, right? They're more likely to put stuff into the system if they're using it. So I want to share that. I want to move on to some stuff on automations, Andy. That's going to blow
Yep,
some
and I'm
minds as
going to stop
well.
this. One of the things I'll share as you're loading that up, Nick, and this is kind of been something again that I've learned and working with a lot of teams now that we train on, right? So as a major gift person, I always relied on the DBA, or we had another kind of like a prospect researcher. I would always have to ask them for the reports. It was
Yeah.
like, hey, like, can you run me this report? Can you run me that report? Because like we didn't have access, like the functionality just didn't exist in the database, right?
Well,
With this work center, many of the reports and the data that I had to rely on somebody else to get for me, often as a last minute request, as you talked about earlier, I now have access to, right? So like they're not having to deal with, oh, Andy's got another stupid request and it's the most important thing. I have to drop everything else. I can now access a lot of those things that I previously had to rely on somebody else to do, which allows that other person to do things that are truly more important that nobody else at the organization can do.
yep. That's what we call a softball, the way that you just serve that up for me. The whole idea that like there's things that you wish it was easier to get the data you need. I want to talk about, so we've talked about high level friction, how to solve it, and with the touchy feely stuff. And then we talked a little bit about Work Center, which solves some of it. What Stacy and Austin and Angie are doing on our team is absolutely ridiculous in terms of the ways that you can automate things to reduce friction. Okay. So I want to show what they've been working on. Talk about a gift digest email, Andy. All right. So this is uh, live for I think one of our clients, of course, to cover up all the information. But a gift digest email. We've done an entire webinar on this called the fundraiser's best friend. If you're managing a large team, this is going to delight two people: all of your, your database people and your major gift officers. So imagine every morning you get an email that looks like this, which is all the new gifts that came to your organization over $1,000. This alone is incredibly helpful. If we do nothing other than, hey, I want to know who made a gift yesterday. Major gift officers want to know that. Development directors want to know that. It's pretty amazing. You can also, it doesn't have to be an email. You can set it up through automation as an instant chat, right? So it'd be something like this, where you have, if you use Slack or more likely you use Teams in your office, you can set up an automation that says, hey, I want to know anytime somebody makes a gift above $500, put it in this dedicated channel. Because then I'm going to do something, right? I'm going to send them a little note, or I just want to know because I want to be able to check. Andy, you can do this for like special event stuff too, right?
Yeah, we actually have some clients that have utilized it for their gala, right? So company registers for the gala, and we need to follow up with them to find out who the 8 people are actually coming, as part of, ABC, chiropractic, or whatever that might be, right? So,
Yep.
or in some situations, like for walk runs, hey, the person RSVP, boom, they've registered. do we need to follow up with them or email them for t-shirt size, or like, are they
Yeah.
doing lunch or something like that? But yeah,
Yep.
it's great beyond just the, hey, I made a gift, event registration, kind of follow up, those kinds of things are very important as well.
So, and we've seen, like pledges paid off. It's really important to know when somebody pays off the final pledge, and so just put it in a dedicated channel. I can scan it, and every time somebody does, I can make sure that we've got them on our next mailing to invite them to make another gift to something else or to send them a thank you note. There's a million uses for this, and every time we roll it out somewhere, we find that it's reducing the friction we talked about earlier, right? All of these solves exist in that world between hardcore data person who knows how to do things but is overwhelmed and can't ever do everything and wants to be able to provide the information, frontline directors, fundraisers, everybody else who wants it in an easier way. They're never going to go live inside of the database. This is what that does, right? It just automate it. Stop fighting the fights. Just automate what they need. You need to know when people make a gift. Great. Here's an email digest every day, and here's a Slack channel, right, or a Teams channel to show you. Um, what you can also do here is bring those frontline fundraisers into Razor's Edge where they should have been anyway. So Stacy, I think Stacy's the one that built this. It might have been Austin. But a large gift, you get a tile, right? So in your Teams channel, hey, notification, this person just made a very large gift. Click here to go view that gift. And when you click on that, it brings you into Razor's Edge, right? Into that work center, into the constituent record, whatever it might be. We've done some amazing things with this. Again, all of this is to show you what's possible because there's technical ways to reduce friction. I've seen a card, Andy, for deceased constituents, right? Like an alert that comes into a Slack channel. Hey, we think that Charles passed away, and you
Yep.
can click on these buttons that we've pre-built, and we're going to go look for any obituaries. Again, there's some national sources we can look at. We want to look at that person's actual record, and we want to go and look at some other source of data that we're getting. In this case, I think it was a diocese getting notified that one of the parishes thought he was deceased.
Yep.
All of this is possible, right? And every one of these automations kind of reduces friction. Let's take it another step further, right? Let's make it even cooler.
It's pick on
Adding
me now.
adding actions. So it's not enough. We talk about the friction of the fundraisers want things served up on a platter and made easy for them. Let's not just send them an email digest of information, right? Let's make it clickable, right? Okay, I'm the frontline fundraiser. I get this email every morning. Here's the 40 tasks that Andy has due. Andy, click on this person's name, and it's going to bring you right there into the record, right?
Mhm.
Or if the action is to do a phone call, just click on the dang phone number there, bring them
Mhm.
back into Razor's Edge, and it's going to pre-populate. It's going to have you there where you can just write your call notes, right? Make it easier. Automation can make it easier for people to actually do the tasks that they are supposed to be doing anyway. Okay, reduces friction. Other ways to use automation. Then I'm going to show you something that's going to really blow your mind. Um, what do we got here? We got 6 of them. Automatically send a gift digest or a notification when somebody new is added. When a new donor makes a gift, give them a little heartfelt outreach, right? If a donor increases a gift, if somebody registers an event, all of these are things you can be doing to automate and reduce friction on a large team where communication is your main issue. Where it gets really useful, okay? This is the unbelievable stuff. So build on what we've done so far. Daily digest, right? I'm a fundraiser. I just got an email every morning of the people that made a gift above a certain amount. That's really cool. What if that digest had a button that I could click as the assigned major gift officer to tell them thank you or to send something? That is what our team has done. That is what Austin and Stacy have done and the whole team at Automate Genius. A daily digest that now you can click on the link on any given gift and not just learn about it, it actually writes the dang email for you. You click on it and it opens up the email. How nuts is this, right? So, Andy, you had to write your own emails in your major
I,
gift officer.
I had to write my own emails, and often it was like copy and paste because I was too lazy to like get creative or do anything else. But I would have sent so many more emails if this was an option. And the fact that I didn't even have to like search for it, like it let me know what I was supposed to do, would have been a game changer. And again, particularly like I traveled a lot, right? So doing major gift work, I was all over the country. Like not having to be in the office, but like wherever I'm at and whatever Hilton or Marriott that I was staying at, to pull up my laptop and be like, boom, I've got 20 or 30 minutes before my next, appointment. Like I can get in there and blast through a few emails and kind of fire them off is a game changer for sure.
And what I love about it, it serves it up on a platter and it's not inside of Razor's Edge, it's in Outlook or Gmail, which is what everybody
Mhm.
lives in anyway. Like if you're a
Yeah,
frontline fundraiser, like
personal
yeah,
message.
have a digest that says, okay, give me anybody who made a gift a year ago that hasn't yet given to the annual fund this year. And give me that list. I'm going to click on it. It's going to serve up this email on a platter. I can edit it all day long, to make it fit me if I know the person. But then I'm just clicking send. And what happens then is you can then add an action in NXT, right? Like you can add it as that, and you can save the correspondence to the record so everybody knows exactly, which is all the stuff that you're getting yelled at all the time, Andy,
Yeah,
uh, because you weren't writing those notes, right?
right.
All right, so I'm going to. This is the moment when everybody is just saying, "This is crazy. Can you believe it?" Um, Sorry, I was busy pulling the poll up here. So that is Automate Genius. And if you want to learn more about that, we can. So this is the poll on your screen. So when we're talking about this, I'll back up on the slides to show you what we're talking about. If this interests you and you want to know more how to make this happen, let us know. So there's stuff that you can do on your own and build it. If there's stuff that you want to have Stacy and Austin build for you, happy to have that discussion. But on this topic of large teams, reducing friction, making people's lives easier, I've never seen anything like this, Andy, that like actually delights the Andys of the world,
Yeah.
the frontline fundraiser guys who are never going to live inside of Razor's Edge, and it delights the Austins of the world who stop getting all these email requests when they can just automate the process and get you what you need. So feel free, if you want to learn more about that, we can reach out to you and connect you with that. All right, final couple of automations, and we're going to get to Q&A. All right, some cleanup automations. You can do all of these things. And really, this slide is for you when you get this later and you want to share it with your colleagues. This is all the amazing stuff that you can do. You can get alerts when dupes are created. You can set up an automation to fill in missing blanks. There's all sorts of crazy stuff you can do on data cleanup that we have lots of clients doing. If you want to help with gift processing, tax letters, the big one. We'll talk about that as we get closer to the end of the year. But like what you can do now to click a button and generate tax letters instead of having to go through that whole awful process, tag people like giving levels or put them in a giving society, all sorts of crazy stuff. Okay. So if you want to learn more about that, like if you want to learn more about automation, Andy, we're doing this. When is this?
In a couple
August.
weeks, I think.
Yes, a couple of weeks, August 6th. So we're gonna dive into all these case studies on automations on August 6th. If you want to register for that, you can. There's a little QR code. We'll send out the slides from this probably by tomorrow morning, I believe. It takes a little bit for the recording to get
Mhm.
compiled. But that'll include a link. But August 6th, we're going to talk only about automations, what we've done, how you can do it at your own organization. So feel free to register for that. Look for the email link. In terms of what's coming up next, we got two popular demand webinars coming up. We can talk about recurring gifts. So that's next month as well. So we had the brilliant Sarah Aligo and Stacy Cope are going to be joining me. How to set up a great recurring gift program. And then Stacy doesn't get to go anywhere. She comes back. In September, we're going to be talking about dashboards. We're going to bring in our buddy Rob, talk about all about dashboards and Insight Designer and all that stuff. Okay. Oof. Covered a lot of ground there, Andy.
We did.
All right. So I want to pause that and I want to give people a chance to ask any questions. So we've got a crew on here, mix of Razor's Edge people, mix of database people, and administrators and VPs of advancement. So if you have questions about anything we talked about, let us know. Andy, while people are looking at that, anything that you feel like we didn't cover well enough, any points that you want to ram home in
No,
what time we have
I
left here?
mean, we talked, obviously you talked a lot about friction, Nick, right? And part of how that friction builds up is communication. Communication breaks down, friction builds up, right? And so the, that's where it really starts and ends. You have to have an understanding and appreciation of what other people in your office do, but to do that, you got to get them together and allow them to talk about what it is that they're doing. You can't make assumptions. I think the the biggest challenge is you think that everybody thinks that their job is the most important job at the organization, and that without you, the place would sink, right? Like
Right.
maybe, but not probably not. And so, just kind of finding out what others do and how you could help that. We actually had somebody at one of the organizations I worked for started out in one role. As we were starting to have these like meetings of talk to me about, what you're doing, how your job works, what's good, what's bad, whatever. They actually took an interest and switched roles at the organization because they were excited about the kinds of things that were happening in another area. We're given, kind of the ability to learn and kind of shadow, some of the people doing those things. and were far happier. I truly believe that if that person would have stayed in their original position,
Yep.
they probably wouldn't have been at the organization for more than a year because they were clearly had an appetite to do more and make a greater impact. And this was an opportunity to kind of allow them to identify that to the rest of the group. And they are still very successfully, doing development work today.
Yep, well said. So, key takeaways then. Let me wrap this up. We'll get it out for folks a little bit earlier, unless people have burning questions. Um, Friction, right, is what's causing all the drama in your office. Like, and friction comes from lack of communication. Our advice is break down the silos, do everything you can functionally to get people to understand other people's jobs. Either do a 1 day offsite retreat or add it to like a monthly meeting or something. People will actually enjoy it. Um, Two, task them, Andy, with actually making someone else's. So,
Mm-hmm.
the second part of that, you can't do the second part without the first part. Once
Yeah.
they know what other people do, task them. Be like, Andy, your job is to find out how to make Austin's life easier. Come back to me in a month with an idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been successful when we've seen it happen. From a razor's edge standpoint, Work Center is really a solution to a lot of friction, right? That's where
Mm-hmm.
fundraisers, and it's
For
soft
sure.
enough that fundraisers can be in there, get everything
Mm-hmm.
they need, and it's useful, and it helps the database person. For some really next level stuff, we've got Automate Genius, which is automating those digests and email alerts, which can delight again both sides of the house. We're pretty proud of that. Okay, so that's everything we covered today. If you have suggestions for more topics, this might be like our 80th webinar. I'm just throwing that out there. It
Been a
might be
lot.
we might have passed 100. Anything you want us to know, we will put some time and effort into it and come up with a good practical webinar for you. So always feel free to reach out to me if there's something you want us to cover. This was something I know that some of our clients wanted us to get into a bit of the softer stuff. So there you go. Managing large fundraising teams, our best advice. Andy, thank you for your time. I know you're busy coming back from vacation here. You got a million emails that are probably piled up as we speak.
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Menke. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, all the attendees. Look for the notes tomorrow morning, and we will see you on either that public demo on August 6th or that next webinar we have coming up in September. All right. Thanks, everybody. See ya.